we are, Bill Lussow, Bespoke. How you doing, my friend?
Pretty good. How are you?
Doing good. Can't beat it. Springtime in Chicago.
Yeah, it's been a doozy.
Yeah. So, I was just looking at the real estate forecast the other day. Everybody's really high on it. It's like, for the foreseeable future, things look really good. Is that what you see?
Yeah. I mean, you got your skeptical folks out there, but we're not seeing a lot of the different circumstances that we saw into the last Great Recession, Depression in 2007. So, yeah, I mean, I think the forecast is still pretty strong. It seems companies are gaining confidence, not becoming flat or losing confidence.
Taking space.
Yeah. I would have to concur.
So as long as there's the demand and they keep the demand, serviced, meaning creating new space, then this trend should continue as long as outside forces don't mess it up. Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and they think that they're a little bit fearful of the tax structure that's getting ready to pass through here. I don't know. I think that people might pass that up because all the labor's here. As far as like a countrywide, a national market, you might say, well, we'll pay the taxes because I can't find labor anywhere else. There's a labor problem now.
There is for sure.
Yeah, so
there is for sure. And we could certainly do things that would benefit the Illinois and Chicago economy. We seem to choose to go the other path frequently, but, to the politicians' chagrin, there's still a huge demand to be in Chicago. And, we've got kind of the epicenter of the Midwest with rail, we got waterway and highway. So it's a great airport. So
we do a lot. We do a few things out of state and all that. And I could tell you that Chicago's a great market to be in. Cincinnati's really seeming to do well right now. Columbus, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Chicago's good. Detroit's pretty good.
Up, yeah.
And a lot of that has got to do with supply and demand. But, I think that, sitting down with a real estate broker, those are the guys that are keyed into it, as far as I always look to you guys for trends and stuff. So, but as a construction guy, I could tell you that, in my 30 or, so years or in the business here, in my own head, it seems to be fairly regular, which is kind of a weird thing to say. Maybe it's because of the niche that we're in. We do, commercial interiors. So if out of the ground work isn't going, we're not affected. If certain aspects of the economy are affected, we seem to be a little bit insulated from it. The .com days, we felt that tremendously.
Sure.
Because that's a huge amount.
Right. They turn the water off.
I remember having contracts where we were ready to go on $5 million build out, and the guy called us one day and said, "Listen, we're done." Mm-hmm. I was like, "What do you mean you're not doing the fifth floor?" "No, you're not getting paid." That was the .com, thing. But since then, even in the Great Recession era, it wasn't that abrupt. The .com bust out seemed to be like, your best friend dropping off the face of the earth, you never see him again. Somebody got struck by lightning or hit by a car. It was abrupt.
Right, very abrupt.
The recession was a little bit more of slow death. It seemed like every day there was bad, there was worse news. And Dow lost 500 points today. Guess what? Dow lost 700 points today. Guess what? Today the Dow lost 1,200 points, and it was just like, well, when is this going to end?
Mm-hmm.
And
still pretty abrupt, though.
It was, but it seemed to be survivable, where the .com thing seemed to be, okay, this is it, it's over.
Money dried up and it's over. Right?
Supply is gone. So But
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing that I've seen in the marketplace, which is a huge difference from, the '07 ramp up, is in '07, we would see, privately held companies' balance sheets be laden with short and long-term debt, trying to finance their growth. And now we're seeing balance sheets laden with cash, which just everybody kind of learned their lesson. The good operators have taken that lesson to heart.
stored in a mattress,
And,
baby.
Yeah,
you need it.
They are, it's growth through strategic acquisition. It's growth through non-debt financing. And
Now, how do you explain that? How do you explain here? Get this closer to you, but how do you explain non-debt financing to somebody who knows nothing about it?
You can either go out and get a bank loan to broaden your scope, pick up more product lines, acquire new customers, or you can save operating cash and instead of paying it all out in dividends and bonuses, sit on it, which just about everybody's been doing since '08. And now you can make your acquisitions and, your customer acquisitions, your new product lines, your new equipment purchases. Maybe you're financing some of that at 50% instead of 80 or 90%.
Yeah.
So it's just a healthier position to be in from an operations standpoint. And, across a myriad of different industries, that's what we're seeing.
So let's talk about a little bit about your bespoke experience. Because when, let's go back even further. What got you into this?
I got back. Well, let's see. I went to college.
You get bit by the real estate bug? Bill?
Yeah, and my father had owned gas stations and convenience stores for the bulk of my youth, and
so that would be in the '70s, right?
'70s and '80s. Yeah.
So how's it like? How's that experience?
Yeah, so I mean, we would drive around, and I would ride with him for the day or the afternoon, and he would look at a piece of property. And so that would be a great place to, put a, convenience store, or fast food store, all these different uses. And so I never really looked at a piece of property as a piece of property. I always looked at it, well, what could that be? And
you're objectifying property. Bill.
Yes, pretty much.
But you know what? I guess the other interesting thing that comes to mind is gas lines, gas shortages, that whole era.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're into that business, we just talked a little bit about the .com bust out and the changes in the economy. When I was a kid, I remember very, very little about it. I remember my parents complaining about how expensive it was one day versus another, but it didn't really affect my life. Did it, as a kid whose dad owned them? Did that affect yours?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest effect that that occurred in his business was he was in distribution. So, number one, he delivered a lot of heating oil to commercial and residential furnaces.
Well, that all had to be affected.
Yeah, we went to natural gas and electric and other utility-driven mechanisms to heat homes and buildings. So when the heating oil went by the wayside, that chunk of his business basically evaporated. Talk about the lights going out.
Yeah.
And then the next major kind of milestone was an outside force, which was deregulation. So it used to be that distributors that located in Cook County were the only ones that could distribute in Cook County, right? So if you were located there, you could distribute there. But if you were in Lake County, you couldn't bring petroleum into Cook County. Well, in the mid to late 80s, they changed the regulation on that, and now all of a sudden, groups in southern Wisconsin could bring fuel oil into Illinois for cheaper than you could bring it down the block.
Mm-hmm.
So, a government interjection into how business was done ended up creating a situation that, essentially put the distribution side of the world out.
Interesting. So, you know what? There's always a way around every problem. And I got to believe that, that's kind of what I still do, every day.
Mm-hmm.
Problem presents itself. You got to figure out a way around it. Just the same way that, as a consequence of everybody's money falling off the face of the earth in the recession, they now have more cash on hand, just like you were talking about. Same thing, I guess, would happen with the petroleum business. They're going to figure out a better way to operate their business so they don't get caught with their pants down. So, so as a kid, I guess you were saying that you were involved in looking at land.
No, just started getting your real estate mind.
What could be on this? You were playing SimCity before there was SimCity, right? Which I played all through college for some reason.
Yeah.
We had this class. I was in architecture school. It was on urban development, and the guy recommended everybody play SimCity or something like that. And we started doing it, and it was actually kind of funny.
Yeah,
because here's you have to allocate land accordingly in order to produce an outcome. I don't know if that simulation was real or not, but it gets you thinking.
Sure.
That you really can't. There's a reason why certain zones are zoned. Interestingly enough, commercial, residential, however they want to do it. But it does affect the ebb and flow of a city and how it operates as a unit. If you want to produce a high tax base, you will have more taxable districts in your city. If you want to produce a different type of outcome, then maybe you'll switch it to just all residential. Now, as a broker, what's the difference between being a residential broker and a commercial real estate broker? It does the same way a city is zoned, kind of that same mentality, producing outcomes. So from a broker's perspective, is it better to be on the residential side or the commercial side?
Well, I've never done residential, so
except for your own house.
Yeah, I couldn't necessarily speak to that. I certainly enjoy commercial more. A lot of the reason why I enjoy commercial is it's really drives into numbers, right? So you need space to facilitate your business, whether it's office space, industrial space, retail space. And you can kind of back into, what does the economics look like for your space requirement? And then the challenge is finding the appropriate fit within a given market that meets the needs of the business. Yeah. Where residential, there's a lot more personal preference that gets involved, and what you're willing to spend $1 million on and what I'm willing to spend $1 million on can differ dramatically.
It's not up to me; it's up to my wife.
Yeah, well, right.
So anyway, so you got started in the business, basically through your father, and looking at how land is used. So translating to like Bespoke and how they operate. What is it that I know that you guys probably have your own set of guidelines and how you look at things and all that. I'm always interested in what makes businesses unique. Partly because I want to take the good from that and see if I could use it. The other part is I'm just interested in kind of how society behaves in general. And there are successful businesses in every sector for a reason.
Well, I think from a space perspective, the macroeconomy really drives what hot buttons are important. So, we can look at a couple different things. In 2009, 10, and 11, the most important piece of the puzzle was low cost, right? So what was my low cost alternative? What can I operate my business in and reduce my operating overhead as significantly as possible? And that was the trend, up until probably 13 or 14. And as we started to come out of the recession and start to see some positive signs, now people are looking to upgrade their image, to facilitate their business elsewhere outside of, in the basement of a building or in an older facility. And now we're kind of at the pinnacle of the complete opposite of that, because we have a labor shortage, and now you need to compete for employees and employee retention. So now we've really started talking about culture and what your office space delivers to your employees. Not only is it functional, but does it have certain things like a kitchenette? Is it located near amenities? Does the building itself have amenities? And these have become very, very fundamental in the fabric of a company, so that they can go out and attract talent that can help them generate more revenue.
Yeah, it's interesting that it's kind of like hunting. When you shoot a deer, if you know where it lives, just go right to where it lives, and eventually we'll go back to where it feels most comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
When your business is dying, being shot, recession, you're generally going to scale things back. You're going to go to your basics. You're going to go to what's the least amount of money I could spend and still survive.
Function, right?
And but when times are good, no one's really hunting you. You don't feel threatened. Then you concentrate on cerebral things that are different about your business that you can showcase to take a better version of your business and put that forward.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that has to do with space. I see it
directly. I mean, you lived it. We lived it.
Yeah.
We were in an old loft building on Ontario, and we were struggling to build out our team, and a lot of it was getting qualified candidates to be interested in working at Bespoke. And we kind of analyzed our situation and realized at the end of the day that we weren't really following our own message that we were delivering to clients. And we ended up relocating to Michigan Avenue and have a wonderful space and overlook the river. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves with a team of 10 individuals that are extremely talented and all an integral part of our team. Yeah. And I took a couple of them back to our old space, and I said, had you met us here, what would your thoughts have been? And they all kind of giggled, and they said, I don't know that we would have taken you seriously. Yeah. So, that was a direct indication of how your space breeds your culture, and your culture is the fabric of your company.
It's kind of antithetical. I mean, you teach people not to judge a book by its cover. And then when you ask them, would you have bought this book if it looked like this? And the answer is always no. Mm-hmm. However, I would say that there's a lot to be said for, I think in your business, you're in a brokerage business and you're in commercial real estate. You've got to be down where the real estate is. I think that's one. I think that in other businesses, maybe it's not that big of an issue, but, in some businesses, it just is. I think that's just the nature of it.
Well, we go through these trends and we look at, all these hypothetical situations. And for a long time, everybody said, the collaborative open space, work situation is your most productive. And now we're finding article after article coming out and saying actually it's counterproductive. And, people, they need spaces to collaborate in, still benefit from some private area where they can get away and concentrate. So once again, this whole concept of what's right and what's wrong is being altered. And, I'm sure you're seeing in your builds. I know a lot of my clients, we've certainly gone from a full open format with a couple of, break-off conference rooms or call rooms into, more of a balance of private offices and even grouping different teams or collaborative groups into certain areas and having different sound buffers and different things involved so that people can concentrate.
Yeah, that's all. It's interesting. We did a podcast with Jim Conley, and we talked about this a little bit. And Western Electric, which was I think in Hawthorne Woods, Western Electric. I think that's the name of the company, Western Electric. The Hawthorne Works facility initiated a study where they studied if you gave people a better work environment, would they be more productive? Mm-hmm. And what they came back with was, doesn't matter. People valued if their boss treated them fairly, if their coworkers were conscientious, if they were getting something out of their job, more than the space they were in. Mm-hmm. So that dovetails a little bit into like the changes in the design concepts, open office versus a structured kind of traditional office space. I've seen them both, and as an architect, I could tell you that I kind of like the open idea because it allows you more room design-wise to do. You focus on different spaces. It's really hard to focus on an individual office architecturally. No one's Frank Lloyd Wright's not interested in that. He wants the big open space where you can make things look cool.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and your density increases with open space, so you can get more folks in. And it's interesting because I think what everybody gets away from, which I think is, unfortunately counterintuitive to human nature, is it's the individual interaction between two humans. And, we try to have technology come in that way. We try to make space come in that way. We try to do all these different elements, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, people want to be appreciated for what they do.
Yeah.
And
I don't think that's ever going to change.
Never. I mean, it's tried and true. I mean, we try to alter it, but at the end of the day, I mean, I heard a speech on, employing millennials, and one of their top five consistent top five responses is their relationship with their superiors at the workforce. So, everybody's trying to, crack the millennial code. I mean, it's real simple. Do the same thing you did in the 60s and 70s, right?
Yeah, and millennials get such a bad rap.
They do.
A lot of it by me, but I will tell you that I think a lot's made up out of that. I mean, there are some things that are true. If you really want to talk about millennials, it's not the millennials that are the problem. It's the parents of the millennials that created the millennials. And I saw that through coaching for years.
Mm-hmm.
But, getting back to what we're talking about here about Chicago real estate. Now in construction, you can kind of boil down the family tree of all the companies that are in the Chicago area right now, down to probably a handful of larger companies that started it all. Can you do the same thing with brokerage?
Yeah, I mean, you've got, your mainstays. You've got several larger companies that were founded here in Chicago. But the lineage of and consolidation in our industry right now, there's very few privately held commercial real estate firms.
No.
The vast majority of the larger firms are publicly traded, which is kind of counterintuitive to delivering an honest product to your client, making your client's needs first, right?
That's an interesting point, because I was talking to my real estate guy. We're thinking about. Well, I'm selling my mother's house. I was talking to him, and there are these things called like boutique listings or private listings or private network listings, right? I didn't even know about it. But basically, they hold something that's private, try to make it as exclusive as they can, and then before they expose it to the greater market. And he's really against it. And one of the things that he cites is that it doesn't serve his client. He's of the mindset that his duty is to the client, that's what I like about him. His duty is not to where he's posting his license.
His brokerage, right?
Yeah. And so it kind of
that's
same thing, right?
Where we're at, right? Yeah. And are there certain opportunities where you can sell your client, so to speak, on an option where there's a greater commission involved for the house, if you will? There are definitely opportunities there where you can misguide even yourself into selling a deal that might not be the best for your client. And that's why I've always stayed in the smaller boutique firms, is on that basis, that I can always serve my client first.
You know what? I agree with that 100%. I think that you can't cost go. Not everybody's that model doesn't work for everybody.
Not for long.
It really doesn't. I mean, everybody looks at it and it's this big, huge, shiny object, especially in the corporate world. I think are the big, huge companies, but the little guys like me and you are the guys who are really driving the economy at the end of the day. I mean, there's more of us than there is of the Walmarts, of the Costco's, of the CB, the larger companies. There really are. I mean, even if you look in construction, there are some really big construction companies, but it's purely at some point a definition of your market. So if you want to be purely transactional, and all you're going to interested in is quantity, and just keep on getting the transactions passed through you, that's one way to do it. That's the Walmart approach in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Price doesn't really mean much. Quality doesn't mean a whole lot. Although you say it does, but you don't really mean it. You can't. It's just impossible. But I think,
right. Are you volume based, or are you building your network based on volume, or are you building your network based on doing the right thing and more of a referral type scenario?
I mean, I was talking about this with the team a couple of weeks ago. What kind of company do you guys want to be? The truth of the matter is that the more unique your company is, the higher your profits are, and the more qualified you are to do certain things. If my construction company only builds orange hammers, we're the best at it. If you're a guy that really likes orange hammers, you're going to go to me, and you're the only one that you can. I'm the only one you can go to. So if you want to concentrate on niche things, I think in my mind, I think that's got more positives than negatives. Now, if you want to build any hammer, any color, any shape, any size, I'll build it to whoever will buy it. There's a market for that too, and it's not that that's a bad market. It's just that
it's different.
You're not going to make the margins per hammer than you would. And so, going back to the company, Bespoke's got a certain customer base, and how you treat them dictates, because it's not a scalable thing. I mean, there's only so many customers Bill Lussow could service properly in any one given time. It's not like you're writing code where it's completely scalable.
Right.
We're in a service industry. We're the same as doctors, lawyers for the most part. You're serving an individual. There's only an individual can only take care of another individual. There's only so many hours in the day.
So much bandwidth, right?
So how you do it is so important, and that's what drives your company, and that's what sets your company apart from other companies is that concept. And it's what I was trying to stress to everybody was that we could either decide to go this way, where we'll bid anything, we'll be the lowest number just to get the transactions. And there's a market for that. You may get lucky, and you may make some money there. But you can go the other way, where the quality is what stands apart. How you deal with individual relationships is what sets you apart. That's also another niche, and there's not a lot of people that can do that effectively. So,
right. Well, that's everybody says the vertical integration piece, right? Where oh yeah, I mean, if we do business together, then we're going to do this, and this, and life is going to be happily ever after. There's very few people that actually execute on that side of here's some reciprocal business. Thanks for doing business, or making connections, or there's a need for an employee. Oh, I just ran into this person; they'd be perfect for your team. And actually making that connection. People say they do it all the time, but the actual execution of that falls off so short. And in running a small business, a team of 10, and with how we operate, not having to arm wrestle with every one of those, but have strategic partners that help out and can give you honest and solid advice. I mean, that is priceless.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you treat it like it's a family can only be so big. But the good news is that it's a family. You get all the reciprocals and all the good stuff that a family comes to you. If you behave like that. Now, if you behave like it's just a bunch of individuals, that kind of goes away a little bit.
It goes away a lot of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think we were talking about this last time, was that the strategy. Well, let me just ask you: is that what Bespoke is all about? Is that your?
I mean, our philosophy and mentality, how we train, kind of the corporate values that we instill. I mean, it's very basic. It's not earth-shattering, principle. It's client first, Bespoke second, broker third. So every decision rotates around what's best for the client, and the second position is keeping the corporate culture and keeping Bespoke high on the radar, and then third and last is yourself. as the broker. And as long as you put more in the first bucket than the second bucket, the third bucket's pretty full all the time.
Yeah.
But getting people to understand that and buy into it, prevents us from hiring a lot of people.
Well, yeah. I mean, here's the other thing. I think it's a wonderful model. Client first. What's best for the client comes first. Then the question is, what's best for the client? Right? So, it's completely rhetorical, but you've got to hire people that know that answer. What actually is in this client's best interest?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the client doesn't believe it, but with enough data and with enough discussion, you can find out what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I run into it in our business all the time. This door versus that door, this level of finish. Is this really what's best for you?
And some of those are hard for us to boil out, right? Obviously there's the structured things like rent, expenses, paint the picture of the hard numbers, right? But then there's the intangibles, which it goes into that office piece or the industrial space and the culture piece, right? So, if you can get your entire staff, because you have free coffee, you have, maybe offer a free beer, as part of your package, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get someone to come in a half hour earlier because they can have a cup of coffee at the office opposed to stopping at Starbucks.
Yeah.
Or they stay hour later. I mean, it's not real genius. If half your team does that and you got a team of 10, you're getting 5 hours more productivity a day, which over a week, it's 25 hours more productivity.
Yeah. But getting back to what's best for the client, right?
What's best for the client?
So you've got to know the client, number one. But you also have to know the market. You have to know what the market's going to do to this guy and what the market's capable of selling him
Mm-hmm.
and taking from him. And so when you hire people, you and I are not always there, right? When we hire people, I've got to have confidence that they're thinking like that.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I don't want this guy to be...
Well, there's a checks and balances for your team, right? I mean, what we promise every client is, either, Vic, Peter, or I will be involved in a transaction, regardless of how big or how small, which, you're certainly not getting that at, many of our competition.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Beyond that, you really have to spend time with your client. We went through this process, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were in the space in Mount Prospect and, moved here. And there was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of listening. There was a lot of learning about Jeff and what he's trying to demonstrate to his team, to his people, how he's trying to create his culture within his company.
Talked me out of the stripper pole, too, thankfully.
Before we got to where we got to. Right?
Yeah.
And there was different levels of budget. There was different costs. I think we even started out with potentially purchasing a building versus leasing. Mm-hmm. So, it's all those different things that we have
I remember really trying to convince you that I wanted to buy the building.
Right.
I remember thinking, this is the way to go, but I'm glad that we talked about it. So that plays into a little bit of what I wanted to bring up, which was strategy. I know what my strategy is overall. And I know that you mentioned client first is a strategy. What do you have favorite clients? And I'm sure you're not going to tell me names, but what about those favorite clients?
Jeff Lange.
Yeah. What about those favorite clients do you like? And what do you think is valuable in your business?
I mean, the easy one is just a mutual respect. I mean, you've been in the trades for a long time and, some people treat you like, okay, well, there's 1 million people that swing hammers and you're just one of those 1 million people.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Then there's other people who are like, wow, Jeff's actually a human being. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
He's got a great family. He cares about others. He cares about kids. He really likes to help the community out. Wow, there's a human being behind it, right? So you forge different relationships, really based upon, the clients that open up to you. And,
yeah, and you know what?
You can take that relationship deeper into a different level.
they get more out of you and you get more out of them
Sure.
that way versus just a purely transactional process. I think that helps any company if you approach it that way. Now, when you think about your business, you're the guy that people go to when they want to lease or purchase commercial real estate, right? You're talking about life-changing things here. So it's not like some other businesses where, the deal that you make could make or break, the guy's business.
There is a lot of, I wouldn't call it pressure, but there's a lot of strategy behind advising someone, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
You have to know what you're doing.
Everybody looks at the financial advising position. They're managing someone's retirement, and they put those people on this huge pedestal, right? Like that person really needs to do a good job. We view that we're at that level or more important, because what's feeding that is the profits from the business, and the space the business operates in, like you mentioned, is either going to augment the success of that company or be the detriment to.
Mm-hmm.
So aligning yourself with the company's goals and what they're trying to accomplish, and listening, is paramount. And there's a notion out there that brokers are purely transactional, and many of them are. Many of them aren't. There's a plethora of great brokers in Chicago, right? And the ones that listen, understand the business, and provide solutions and strategy to accomplish what the business owner set out to do. It's a big differentiator.
And you can't replace it with technology. I think that look at companies like we all love to do without lawyers. And just because there's some software called LegalZoom or whatever it is, it doesn't replace.
Well,
you got to sit down and talk to somebody face to face.
And it's just like anything else, right? I mean, if you're looking for a 200 square foot office where you can go 3 days out of the week, right? Do you need a broker?
No,
not necessarily. Right?
You can point and click.
If you need a quit claim deed where you need to fill out 6 lines, I mean, LegalZoom is probably a sufficient means to do that.
Life's not that easy.
Right. You want to do an estate plan? You can get yourself in a world of hurt going to LegalZoom, right? So it's the same, it just really depends on what your need is, right? I mean, you don't go to the dentist because your heart hurts, right? So you need to make sure that you've got someone that's on your team that can guide you and give you real world, data points and listen. Say it again, and really get to the bottom of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and it's hard to get somebody convinced to do something. It's hard to convince a client of anything without good information. Mm-hmm. So I think it starts off with knowing your job.
Well, it's interesting because I don't really feel like I convince clients ever. Right? My job isn't to sell or convince. My job is to present solutions that naturally one is going to become the front winner. Right? So I went through this process with a client moving from Lombard to the O'Hare market. And he kind of set his price point, where he thought he wanted to be. And we went and took a tour of some properties, and after going through about 6 or 7 buildings, he kind of looked at me. He's like, I'm really disappointed. I said, well, what if you spend, another $500 a month? I said, well, I could probably do that. I said, okay, well, let's go take a look at another group of properties that, is going to be, $6,000-$7,000.
This is moving into O'Hare?
Into the O'Hare, Rosemont Des Plaines, right. Yeah. And so we went out the second day, and he looked at another 6-7 properties, and I couldn't get the smile off his face.
Oh, yeah?
So there you go.
Yeah.
Your dilemma's solved. Right now we have to choose which one. And at the end of the day, we got a proposal from the first batch properties and a proposal from the second batch properties. And it's $200 a month.
Oh, really?
$2,400 a year to go from a not so happy face to a huge smile face. Yeah. It's well worth that cost.
So much of Both of our businesses revolve around conceptualizing a situation, conceptual budgets, conceptualizing different rent bases, different structures, how you're going to pay, and all that stuff. That all comes from experience. It's really hard to do your job effectively without using your knowledge the right way. So all the time I see it. How many times have you asked me, how much is this going to cost this way? By the way, can you break out 9 different alternates for this, and this? And, it's a lot of work, but at the end of the day, that's what's required.
Well, and that 100% experience base, right?
Yeah.
The commercial real estate world, we try to make rents confusing because it's, job security, right? Every deal's a little different.
Yeah.
But, in advising clients and working with a GC, I can call you and say, hey, I know that these 2 requests are going to be super expensive. Break those out so that my client can see, you want marble and mahogany, that's a $20,000 add-on where, we could do, an LVT with, something decent, and all of a sudden that's right in their wheelhouse. Now, because of my experience, I know roughly what those cost. You put the real world numbers to them. And now, again, I'm not selling anything. They're educated. They can make a decision. Do you want to spend the extra 20 grand on that? If you do, that's great.
No, it's really important to do that. You can't.
And that's where, years and years of experience and watching, a lot of construction projects, you know where the cost savings are, where you can get the same desired end result, but save a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think that's the key. And I think that, that's the knock on the millennials is that they're young. They don't have that yet.
Well, that's right.
Right. But they're actually not that young. They're getting older and older. But in any business.
Well, in any generation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's always the younger generation that, doesn't have the knowledge. Well, if they have the knowledge.
Finally, we've got the knowledge.
Right. We're there.
Well, I mean, look, I remember being a young guy, fresh out of college in the business. And from my perspective, I was undervalued. That's narcissistic and self-centered.
That's every generation.
It is.
Right.
And it's not just millennials, but
no.
they're there now, and that's just how it is. But I mean, as a person now who's in charge of, hiring and firing, every once in a while you have to remind somebody of that fact that, listen, you just don't have you're just not as valuable as you think, but you will be at some point. If you let me teach you, I'll be happy to. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about my job now is that I do more coaching than, any other time in my life. And you get to use your experience and what you've learned. You feel like that old guy.
Your grandpa.
I remember
right.
back in thermal paper, we didn't have cell phones back then.
Right.
And I was just talking to a client about, when a broker or a client would call me and say, here's the drawings. First of all, the system changed this way. I would find out about a job probably 70% of the time. Jeff, here's a set of drawings. Drawings were done. Okay? We're in permit right now. Need you to price this out. Okay. I took those drawings, I reproduced them, probably 30 or 40 different sets, brought them back to the office. People came to the office to pick up the drawings. They took them back to their office. They bid on it. They faxed me a fax, on thermal paper that curled up. And if you left it in the sun, it would bleach out. And so that process, you could bid on a job, by the time you got the drawings till the time you gave somebody a number, it could be 6-7 weeks.
Right.
Now that process is reduced. Can you get me a number in 3 or 4 days? And it's like, okay, yeah, I guess I can. I mean, but you've got to really use the technology to churn a project around that quickly.
There's no question. And I mean, when I first started in the business, we had a 3-ring binder in the office with all the different office buildings in Schaumburg.
Black's Guide.
Yeah, Black's Guide, right. And then we went one step further, had all the brochures so we could sit down with a client and kind of go through them. Once you identified the square footage requirement, though, you had to call every single building. Do you have 5,000 feet? No. Next, 5,000 feet. Yeah, you got it. Okay, good.
Can we go see it?
And there was
No.
hey, shoot me an email with the plan. You had to go out and take a look at it. And yeah, I mean, it's just the process was a lot longer.
Access to visualizing the space must have been almost nothing, right? I mean, you had a binder, you had old floor plans probably.
Whatever was on the floor plan, the day we got it.
So you had to actually go out there and visit it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's, now things are so much, God, I can't imagine anybody putting up with that now. If you gave somebody that experience now, they'd walk out of your office.
No question. It's even counterintuitive. There's still. Can
you imagine?
Oh yeah, right. There's no putting up with it. There's still landlords though that no DocuSign. They want they'll send you a copy of the execution copies. You got to sign it, and they want wherever the ink dried, they want that exact document back. Mm-hmm. Electronic copies are no good, right?
That's funny. I still receive from time to time bids via fax, and kind of.
I haven't had a fax in 8 years. I had a client get really upset with me because they were on a cruise and they couldn't figure out how to get me a signed contract. I need a fax number. So why don't you just take a picture of it with your phone and text it to me?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Really?
Okay.
Eye opener, man. You can do that.
It's like, that'll suffice until you get on dry land.
So let me ask you this: bespoke versus your competition. And by your competition, I mean guys in your same niche. Mm-hmm. Like you know who they are. Who your competitors are. Do you think that everybody's kind of catching up and using the same techniques and the same strategies and the same technologies? Or do you think that they're very different?
I mean, there's certainly different use of technology to some capacity, but at the end of the day, it gets down to that you're going to do business with people you know and like.
It gets down to the individual.
What's your knowledge? Have you done this before? Have you successfully done this a number of times? And do I want to do business with you? Yeah. So you can do a pretty PowerPoint. You can have the best looking print collateral in the world. But at the end of the day, if you don't have experience and people don't trust you, you're not going to win.
Right. Individual rules today. Mm-hmm. Not a mass produced. No.
And there are some different platforms that are trying to, make waves in commercial real estate where, you really don't even meet a broker. You put your requirement into a piece of a website, and they give you a list of properties. And there's just you lose that personal touch, and things as a broker that people, after you listen, people will actually tell you, hey, I don't want to be in a single story building. I want to be in a multi-story building. Mm-hmm. So if you have that. The more technology-based solution, half those options they receive, they might not even want to see, right? But the artificial intelligence hasn't gotten to the point where it can decipher that.
You know what? You can buy a pizza online too. You can buy a lot of things online. I think there's going to be some things that are better for sure because of the AI experience. There's no doubt. I mean, for me, I'd rather buy a car without talking to a salesperson. But I know for some people, it's the exact opposite. It's because they value that experience.
Yeah, it depends on what the salesperson's like.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you got an honest person that just wants to educate you and answer your questions and is knowledgeable about the product, that can be an enjoyable experience. Unfortunately, the stereotype in the car industry is that is not the norm.
They just need to get. Here's my gripe with buying cars: it shouldn't be an all-day thing. Mm-hmm. That's my only thing. I like the people. I like what they have to say. I can listen to them. I don't need to be there all day.
It's a commodity.
I don't need to be there all day.
I want a black Explorer Sport with black interior. Here's the exact same car across 4 dealerships. I just want the lowest price.
Basically,
right?
Yeah.
There's no. It's a vehicle. Right?
But knowing that, See, that's the thing is that a good salesperson will know that, and they'll try to make that happen for you as quickly as possible. I think that, and that's I think has happened to a certain extent.
I still, I had one Ford dealership. This is a couple years ago when I was buying the Explorer. He literally looked at me and said, "Well, our service department's better." I said, "Yeah, but your service department's 45 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
So I'm never going to see your service department." And he kind of was like, "Well, I guess you answered your question." Yeah, but I mean, if you look at buying luxury brands versus domestic brands, I mean, that's part of the experience too.
Yeah, for sure.
You take an Audi in for service. I mean, you got a foot massage, cup of coffee, and a croissant that's warm. You go to a domestic dealership. I mean, you're scraping coffee off the bottom of a pour over coffee mug. Not quite the same experience, but yet the service costs the same.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's like, why am I not going to go the other direction?
Yeah, I agree. You know what? I wanted to ask you about hockey.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of guys in the industry, and hockey's played a pivotal role in their career.
Mm-hmm.
Same for you?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Started skating when I was 4 years old.
And why does everybody in commercial real estate play hockey? What happened?
I don't know that everybody plays hockey. There's
a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. I think there's a lot of athletes, that are.
You know what? You're right. We talked about this.
Estate. Yeah. I think it's just it's a difficult industry. You need
to be competitive
hang in there. You need to be competitive.
Yeah.
You need to be able to. You have to have previous knowledge of how to win and lose. Right. It's not an industry where you want to learn that behavior. So
you know what? You're right. Construction is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You're bidding on things. You're competing by definition every single day.
Right.
There's a certain personality that's in this business.
Mm-hmm.
It's guys who like to compete. They like to win. And you know what? A lot of the guys in in construction, they play competitive sports.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter what the sport is. The older, then you get a little bit older and you play golf. And you make that competitive, and you throw clubs and all kinds of other stuff. But I think our business is made up of a lot of testosterone. It's one of the things that I think in the competing aspect of it, people crave it. That's why they're doing it. They could have been doing other things. They're not
Sure.
competing so much for, but we are. And so hockey just falls into it, right? So you meet a lot of guys. I remember the broker hockey event that we had was we sponsored just maybe a month ago.
About a month ago, yeah.
It was incredibly successful. We raised $15,000, I believe, from Misericordia.
Best year yet.
Best year ever.
Yep. Yet.
Yeah.
Maybe next year.
Next year we're going to double that, right?
Right, there you go.
You got to fill two.
Yeah, I mean,
two
it's
rinks.
just a good camaraderie. I mean, the hockey community in Chicago is pretty tight to begin with. As you get older in the sport, there's less and less people that played, and you kind of, everybody knows each other to a large extent. Or if you don't know them specifically, you probably played on some all-star team or something where, know a name or two, and it brings down those, that vast separation of, the greater Chicagoland area. Like, oh, you're a hockey guy? Okay. Oh, you know this guy? Okay, yeah, you're a good guy, right?
Right.
Or maybe not.
Get some street cred, or you're never going to have any street cred. It just depends.
So, it's one of those things where, it's like a variety of other things, but it seems like there is a pretty good foothold of hockey guys that are.
Well, you know what? Some of the other functions, like some of the BOMA functions and some of the crew functions, or the industry related things, you see a lot of people over and over again. It is an incestuous kind of business in that way, and I think those are the things. One of the things I think we had Wickman in here, a while back, and he was talking about how much these organizations have really done for him.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets involved in a lot of the BOMA or another event where they sponsor a lot of golf. They raise a lot of money for different causes. And, those are the things that, are part of the job that we do. Some of them think that they're ancillary to what we do, but those are the things that you tend to remember the most.
Sure.
are the relationships that you made through some of these organizations. And I know Wickman's probably going to give me a bunch of shit because I know I probably got it wrong, but I know that that was one of the things that struck me about him was how he felt like he owed something to the organization. And so I don't know, hockey, maybe you feel like you owe something to it. Maybe it owes you a new set of knees or something,
hips.
But yeah, hips for sure.
I mean, the organizations, they help make the real estate community smaller, right? And all of a sudden you start seeing people on a regular basis, and instead of being an adversary that works for another company, all of a sudden you're like, wow, Wickman, he is a good guy, great guy.
Oh, who would have thought that?
You do want to do business together, right? And there's a lot that goes into that. Is okay, so you've got X amount of solutions for a client, and then now you start to see the other side. Who's the ownership? Who's the property management company? Are they going to take care of that client once they get into a property? Yeah, right. And some of my close friends have experienced some interesting scenarios. Yeah. With the buyer beware. But it's a big part of it, right? And you can do your best job of negotiating a tremendous deal, and at the end of the day, get rubbed the wrong way, it's a problem. So, what is it that you think you like the most about it, about your job? About my job, I don't really view it as a job. Yeah, so that's kind of fun. Really, just getting to know business owners. It truly is. I got to tell you, I feel the same way. Whether it's a client, or whether it's, someone like yourself who's a client and, a very strategic partner in the business, it's fun to get to know people that are, similar-minded, like-minded individuals that, want to help and give back, and want to help each other's clients. And it's, it's really us kind of serendipity, but, a lot of my job revolves around talking to other tradesmen. Plumbers, electricians, mill workers, carpenters, and on and on. And the stories that you hear from these guys. And I came up through the trades. So I'll just sit there and listen to them, and I love it. And that's kind of the inspiration for the podcast was sit down and talk to guys about their experience throughout the industry, how it's changed, what's made it what it is today. It's really funny because, when you get guys talking about what they really like, a lot of it doesn't come down to the accomplishment in their career as much as it does the people who they've met through the process. And that's kind of what we're trying to do. That's why it's not a job. That's why it's not a job, man. And that's why we got guys like you sitting here talking to us, and it's been great. I mean, we've been talking here now for like an hour, and that's the other thing. Nobody's probably going to watch the full hour. Sure they will. Maybe your kids or your wife. Provocative. Yeah, my wife will probably never watch a full hour of me talking, but I will. Like, I'll sit there and watch long format discussions, and I have that mindset. But a lot of guys don't. But because you do it all day long, like all day long, I'm talking to somebody about. It could be something incredibly mundane, like, how are you going to get this ceiling in this space when you got these different configurations? I remember we had this job, we did this, and, we did that, and I guess it could lay it out this way. And those things are interesting to me because I'm an architect at heart, and I like to know how things are built, and I like to figure out, how you're stacking bricks. And from your perspective, in the brokerage world, it's kind of you're stacking bricks, but you're doing it with different materials. You're doing it with accounting methods or diversification or expansion or contraction. Those are all your tools that you guys use. Right. Well, and it's looking at what a client's needs are and how can you get creative to provide a solution. For somebody that is a meaningful contribution to their organization. That's the fun part. Yeah. Right, at the end of the day. Well, Mr. Bill, I thank you very much. Yeah. Sitting down with us. We'll have you back again when I'm sure this won't work. So we'll have you back again to do it. Happy to do it. All right, Bespoke. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff.